Now, Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 101.9 FM. AM 630. WMAL.
8:37 on the Morning Majority. Brian Neiman, Mary Catherine here. Brian Wilson off for a couple days, missing him. But we've got Larry Kudlow on the phone, host of the Kudlow Report on CNBC. And the Larry Kudlow Show on WMAL, Saturdays at 7 p.m. How's it going, Larry?
Hey, Mary Catherine, how are you?
Let me ask you about this poll. It's a USA Today Gallup poll. It shows that when Americans are asked who they blame for the poor economy, 64% name the federal government and 30% name big financial institutions.
Right.
I was sort of surprised by that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was surprised at that because of the brilliance and clairvoyance of the people that were polled. I mean, I've never understood this narrative that Wall Street destroyed the economy or the banks destroyed the economy. I acknowledge that some banks took excessive risks and made mistakes, but when you look at the housing and mortgage and credit policies coming out of Fannie and Freddie, which, destroyed their credit system and, in a sense, forced all these banks to make loans to low-income people without documentation. That's an important part of the story, and the easy money from the Federal Reserve Board. So I say that Wall Street was complicit, but Wall Street was not the ultimate cause of the Community Reinvestment Act or any of those things that were done in Washington, D.C. in the 90s and the 2000s. So it's interesting to me that people may be more sensible about life than these protesters are.
Well, and it seems to me that they've been getting a pretty steady diet of down on Wall Street and all that kind of stuff, and the president wants to bank on that sentiment, but it looks like there might not be as much of that sentiment as he hopes for.
That's exactly right. And, I think that at this stage, 3 years into his presidency, Obama has to take ownership of the results of the presidency. We know he inherited a very bad economy. I'm not going to argue against that, absolutely. But his spending policies and his tax and regulatory policies increasingly loom large over the economy. And I think in particular his, this class warfare, business bashing, millionaire bashing, I don't think it pays off. I could be wrong. I don't think it's good politics. I know it's bad economics. It's very divisive. It's demoralizing. And I think... I don't know. I sense that ordinary, average people, whoever they may be, have the same feeling that he's not getting anything solved, and this is just all politics, and it's lousy, distasteful politics to boot.
Yeah, I think most people look at the Occupy Wall Street protesters and they say, well, I understand they're upset, but what they're asking for, what they're doing in the streets doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I tend to believe that most Americans would say, what the Tea Party says is a little bit more mainstream and realistic than what the Occupy Wall Street demonstrators have. That's why I kind of think it's a net win for opposition to the president.
I have no doubt that a lot of the protesters are just people like most Americans that are very cranky and very unhappy with high unemployment, okay? And so therefore I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I also have no doubt that the core of this protest is very hard left, very anti-capitalist, very anti-business, and wouldn't mind tearing the system down. There's a very good article by my friend Charlie Gasparino up here in New York in the New York Post, posters of Che Guevara, and the protesters address themselves, the leaders address themselves as comrade. I mean, that kind of thing opens my eyes to what the hardcore core probably is in that group. And again, it's profoundly anti-capitalist, profoundly anti-business, and I think sensible Americans know that free markets is the best system, and free enterprise and business creates jobs. And if you bash business, you're on the wrong side of the issue.
Well, there's been a lot of talk about 999. We've talked about that before. Is the most important component to 999 the corporate tax? I mean, people talk about, dropping rates or whatever, but don't you think that dropping the corporate rate, it seems to me from listening to a lot of people, would actually do the most benefit for creating jobs?
Well, I think right now that's probably true. I mean, I always thought some kind of fundamental corporate tax reform while keeping other tax rates steady would be a very good policy. Drop the top rate. Now, Herman Cain's got a great plan. I may not agree with every detail of the plan, but it's essentially a flat tax plan with lower marginal rates and a broader base, getting rid of deductions. He's got a sales tax component which is a relic of the old fair tax that Herman has supported down through the years. Okay, I'm not overly enthusiastic about that sales tax component. On the other hand, I'm going to sort of wait and see what he has to say about it, whether in fact it's an add-on or whether in fact it's a replacement. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. There's no question that he's the guy who wants to replace, tear down the tax code. And I think that's great. The code needs to be torn down. And so as a flat tax guy, I'm very sympathetic to what Herman Cain is doing.
All right, you served in Washington during the Reagan administration when there was a huge, takedown of taxes. And I know you're a flat tax guy, but do you think politically you can get a flat tax passed, even with Republicans controlling the Senate and the House and maybe even the White House?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's possible. It's very possible. I mean, I think the movement towards full-fledged tax reform is a very strong movement. Very strong movement. So simplification is a very strong movement. What you're really asking is how far could you go?
Yes.
And I don't know the answer to that. 999 could be the answer to that. 15% could be the answer to that. 20% could be the answer to that. It's a hypothetical. I just think the principle is really important, and I think Herman Cain has the right principles. I think it is pro-growth. I think it would create a lot more jobs than the current system. And I think it's a lot better than raising tax rates on successful earners.
Sure.
That's the key point that I want to make. It's a complete reversal, negating what President Obama is trying to do. I mean, Obama's idea of tax reform is to raise all the top rates and raise them substantially to close to 50%. To me, that's a job killer. And Cain's idea is to lower the rates across the board and to exempt the double tax on saving and investment. And I think that's exactly what we want. And by the way, most economists, I mean, you've had these bipartisan proposals, Simpson-Bowles and Rivlin, Domenici, and others, that move essentially in the direction Cain is moving in. So it's a question of how far, but I think the principles are dead right.
Can we ask you real quick about this mortgage plan? Do you know anything about this new mortgage plan to help bail out basically people who are underwater but on time on their payments could refi?
Yeah, I'd have to take a look at that. I mean, if you're on time on your payments, you can refi now. It's just a question of getting the credit. So I'd have to take a look at the fine print. I know this thing's coming up, but I don't know enough about it yet.
All right, Larry. Good to talk to you as always. Thanks for coming on.